So although I don't talk a whole lot about it, I have been working on a few projects here in Northern California based on a few topics. These projects are in their infancy, but for example, one of my main projects has been related to the Native American history of this area. Now, of course, it is a very unfortunate history in many regards, and I'm not 100% sure if I have really a laser focus on what I want to photograph yet, whether I want to take a new topographical style approach or a more documentary style approach. But nonetheless, I think it's important that I get out there and just take photos whenever I get the chance. So trying to keep this mantra of just getting out there and shooting and seeing what works, I did take my Pentax 6.7 up to the Mount Shasta area in the far north of the state. This is a beautiful area, and I figured I'd find some sources of inspiration around the town of Yreka. It was a brisk winter's morning, and Mount Shasta was showing a decent coating of snow through the varying layers of fog. Once I got into the town of Yreka, I loaded up a roll of Portra 400 and hit the street. One of the reasons that I chose Yreka is because it has a long history dating back to the gold rush in the 1840s, 50s. This history is crisscrossed with numerous tribes, including the Karuk, Shasta, Yurok, and Modoc. Many Euro-American residents of Yreka and the surrounding Siskiyou County were quite hostile, if not downright genocidal, towards the local tribes. And this is something that I wrote about extensively for my master's thesis. For this video, I won't dive too much into this history, but I will leave you with this contemporary newspaper excerpt that well outlines the attitude for many at the time. This quote comes from the August 7, 1853 edition of the Yreka Mountain Herald. At the time, the area's settlers and local tribes were in an especially vicious back and forth cycle of raiding, cattle theft, and murder. It was in reaction to this that the paper's editor said, "Now that the general hostilities against Indians have commenced, we hope that the government will render such aid as will enable the citizens of the North to carry on a war of extermination until the last redskin of these tribes has been killed. Extermination is no longer a question of time. The time has arrived, the work has commenced, and let the first man that says treaty your peace be regarded as a traitor." It's a bloody history that continues to impact these tribes to this day, and if I could, I would love to include their perspective in this project, whether it be from a new topographical or a more so documentary standpoint, and that's just something I haven't gotten into yet, but something I would like to do. Yreka also has interesting mining history, it has logging history, it has railroad history, and it has a history of ranching. Overall, this is some very rich historical territory worth documenting. This photo in particular really jumps out to me as an instant favorite of the trip. I tried quite hard to find a composition that worked well with the directional lighting, and in the end, I'm glad that the shadow of the stop sign draws the eye towards the center of the image. Midway through the first roll, and I did pop into a couple thrift stores just to see if I could find anything, and of course I did come across a nice little treasure trove of cameras and accessories. In particular, I'm quite excited to have found this Zeiss Icon IcoFlex 2A, and after some work I've actually gotten it back into working shape, and it'll definitely be part of some sort of IcoFlex review in the near future. One of my favorite spots to photograph in Siskiyou County is this old junkyard right off of I-5. I was shooting right into the sun though, so you'll see my hand a couple times in frame as I try to block out any sort of glare. So let's start with the bad news, and that is that I got here a little later than I would have liked. So the sun's a little higher, the lighting isn't as good, and really the sun is right behind Mount Shasta, really obscuring it. But on the other side, there's a lot of fog moving in and out right now, which makes for some really interesting conditions. Of course, as the day got brighter, I did switch up to some good old Kodak Gold 200. I should mention that I did go back to this junkyard later in the day as the sun moved away from behind Mount Shasta, and these newer photos I like a lot better just because you could actually see Shasta in the background. Around the same time, I did go back to also rephotograph the abandoned Cattlemen's Club. I say rephotograph because I actually photographed this building about 200 years ago or so when I was doing my Iconta video review. As much as I enjoyed those photographs, I wanted to retry it in 6x7 format with some color negative film. Although it may not be interesting to most, I always got to photograph some classic fence posts, especially when they aren't necessarily fence posts. In this case, it was a nice old juniper tree, and then those old car tires just added an extra dimension to the composition. As the day drew to a close, I elected to go to a view of Shasta that has been saved on my Google Maps for ages. This happens to be one of the more open views of the mountain and easily one of my favorites. For my very last photo of the roll, I found a nice little pull-off that apparently doubled as a deer carcass dump, as you can see. Just a classic Siskiyou County site. Well, that is the last of my Gold 200. I think I took 30 photos total, so that's a successful trip in my book. And overall, even if I got one photo from this day into the project, I'd consider it a huge success. But with that being said, things are still pretty young at this point, and I just don't know specifically what directions I want to go in or just the breadth of the project. The photos that would be possible contenders include these three. Although none of these have any sort of reference to California's native tribes, I think that part of the challenge of this project involves interweaving Euro-American landscapes with an overarching historical narrative related to the local tribes. In all three, one does see the quote-unquote human-altered Euro-American landscapes, but the real challenge comes with adding the historical narrative in an engaging format and fashion. But nonetheless, I'm glad to be sharing more of the details with you, and I would like to also just share more of the local history in these videos and through these photos. So if that's something that does interest you, just let me know going forward. But nonetheless, I will clumsily be going through Northern California trying to piece this project together, so you'll have something to look forward to if you enjoy that.